You point at your coffee before you say a word. You wave someone over before you call their name. Your hands move before your mouth opens. You've never questioned it. But the real answer is far stranger than habit. Your hands are speaking a language older than every word you know. Watch yourself the next time you're on a phone call. No one can see you. And yet your hands still move. They still shape the air, still point at nothing, still carve out invisible boxes and arrows for a listener who isn't even looking. Why would your body do that? What is it doing that speech alone can't? For decades, scientists assumed gesture was decoration, a side effect of talking, something your hands did because your mouth was busy and your body needed somewhere to put the extra energy. But psychologist David McNeil spent years filming people mid-conversation, frame by frame, and found something that didn't fit that story at all. Gesture and speech weren't two separate systems running side by side. They were locked together, timed to the same rhythm, drawing from the same thought before a single word had even formed. Your hands weren't decorating your sentence. They were building it with you. That discovery cracked open a much older question. If gesture and speech are this tightly fused, which one came first? Go back further than language, further than fire, further than the first stone tool sharpened with intention. Go back to a time when your ancestors had no words at all, and somehow still had to warn each other, still had to plan, still had to ask. Neuroscientist Michael Corballis spent much of his career arguing that spoken language didn't start in the mouth, it started in the hand. Long before your ancestors could shape a vowel, they could shape a gesture. A flat palm pushed forward, a closed fist raised, a finger tracing the shape of a predator's horns in the dirt. These weren't random movements, they were information, passed silently between bodies that hadn't yet learned to talk. Here's the strange part. This isn't just a theory about fossils and guesswork. You can watch it happen today. In the forests of Uganda, researchers led by Catherine Hobater spent years documenting wild chimpanzees, cataloging every gesture they used to negotiate, request, and reconcile with each other. Over 80 distinct signals. A chimp raising an arm to request grooming. A juvenile tapping a parent's shoulder to ask to be carried. These weren't taught. They weren't copied from humans. They emerged on their own, inside a species that split from your ancestral line millions of years ago. Which means the impulse to gesture wasn't invented by humans at all. You inherited it. Now here's where it gets even stranger. Psychologist Susan Golden Meadow spent decades studying deaf children born to hearing parents who never learned formal sign language. These children weren't taught a language. No one modeled grammar for them. No one corrected their sentences. And yet, on their own, without instruction, these children built something out of nothing. Golden Meadow called it home sign. A gestural system that wasn't just a collection of pointing and waving. It had order. It had structure. Nouns came before verbs in a consistent pattern, the way real languages organize meaning. Children who had never heard a single sentence spoken were still building grammar, with their hands. Sit with that for a second. If grammar can emerge from gesture alone, without a single spoken word ever entering the picture, what does that tell you about which system came first? It tells you speech didn't invent language. Speech inherited it. And your own brain still carries the evidence. Broca's area, the region famous for producing speech, isn't purely a language center. Brain imaging studies have repeatedly shown it activates just as strongly when you watch someone perform a meaningful hand gesture, even in total silence. The same circuitry that lets you form a sentence also lights up when you simply watch a hand move with intention. Speech didn't build a new system from scratch. It moved into a house that gesture had already built. So why did your ancestors ever switch? If hands worked, why trade them for sound? Because hands have a fatal limitation. They only work in the light. They only work when someone is looking. The moment your ancestors needed to communicate in darkness, or through thick brush, or from one side of a fire to another where faces were hidden by smoke, gesture failed them completely. Sound didn't care if you were looking. Sound traveled around corners, through darkness, over distance. Somewhere in that shift, in that pressure to be heard without being seen, your ancestors began pushing meaning into their throats instead of their hands. But the old system never got deleted. It got layered underneath. That's why you still talk with your hands on the phone to someone who will never see it. That's why toddlers point at what they want months before they can say the word for it, using gesture as a bridge into speaking rather than a replacement for it. That's why, across wildly different cultures and languages that share no words in common, people still use strikingly similar gestures to represent size, direction, and rejection. The hand never stopped being a language. It just stepped back and let the voice take the lead. There's one more twist that makes this even harder to shake off. Researchers studying language development in blind children found something that shouldn't be possible if gesture were purely learned by watching others do it. Blind children who have never once seen a hand move through space still gesture while they speak. They point toward things they cannot see, shape their hands around ideas no one taught them to shape, which means gesture isn't something you copy. It's something that's already wired into you, waiting to surface the moment you have a thought to share. So the next time you catch your hands moving while you talk, on a call, in an argument, alone in your kitchen rehearsing something you'll never actually say out loud, don't think of it as a nervous habit. Don't think of it as filler. That movement is the oldest part of your communication still online. It was working long before your ancestors had a word for fire, long before they had a word for danger, long before they had a word for love. It was there first. You point at your coffee before you say a word, and you always will, because some part of you remembers that hands spoke first, and your voice is still just catching up.